Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to the Harbor CNCF Harbor Community Meetup. It's the 25th of September. This is a recorded conversation, a recorded meeting, so please make sure you adhere to the CNCF Code of Conduct. So we have a few things for you guys today, and Josh has joined us to talk a little bit about Chart Museum and Harbor. So we look forward to kind of having his expertise and kind of talk to us about some of the work that he's doing there. So let me go ahead and share my screen here really quickly. Let me know if you can see this.
Yep, looks good.
All right, cool. So there's a few things that we want to put on the agenda, and then we'll open it up for everyone to kind of bring any topics of concerns that they have. So the first one is we released a version 1.9 on September 19th. So that was last Thursday. Again, congratulations to the team and the folks that worked really hard on this. I know Nathan is really excited that we have tag retention policies now for the first time in forever in Harbor. So that was, thank you for spearheading and kind of lighting up a fire on the community for that work. And I'm really glad to see that. But if you kind of think about release and, some of the features that we have, it's a really, really comprehensive release. For the first time ever, we can have enterprises deploy Harbor within their environment and really be able to set guardrails around how should developers or business units within the organization consume Harbor. Everything from webhook support for CI/CD integration to tag retention to quota policies to syslog endpoint log forwarding. All of those are really key features that enable enterprises to go and put Harbor, put the guardrails in, and let developers use Harbor as a self-service. So really amazing release by the community, and we'll probably have a webinar that will guide everyone through some of the features of 1.9. So stay tuned for that. I think our tentative date is October 15th. The blog that's linked here is available, so you can read these features at a high level. And if you have any questions, feel free to chat with us on the CNCF list or Slack. Any questions on 1.9 by anybody? All right, cool. So the next thing, and coincidentally happened to be on the same day, we had to issue our first CVE advisory from Harbor. For all releases between 1.7.0 to 1.7.5 and between 1.8.0 to 1.8.2, Harbor had a critical vulnerability that basically resulted in any malicious user being able to create a brand new account in Harbor and make them an administrator. So this is a significant elevation of privilege. The workaround is to disable self-registration in Harbor, and in the advisory we talk about that as well. But we also patched all the releases of Harbor, so there's a patch for 1.8.3, 1.7.6, and 1.9.0. All three of them have patched this vulnerability. So this was the first time that we went through that process. It was a significant step forward for Harbor as a project because it allowed us to not only figure out how to deal with the CVE, but we also created and finalized our Harbor security policy. So if you actually click on this link, let me actually share my desktop. That way you can see the links as well. So here we have our security release process. And essentially, we created this process mimicking what other CNCF projects have done. So if you look at Project Envoy, Kubernetes, that they have a very similar release process. And this dictates around what should happen if someone internally or externally finds a vulnerability in Harbor. How should they report it? What is the process under which we're going to patch, release, and disclosure this? And very importantly, what is the embargo policy? Because with security fixes, we don't want it to be known to the entire world around what kind of issues we have in Harbor until we've had the chance to remediate them and guard our users. the set of maintainers from Harbor will probably be aware of these security fixes ahead of time because they're going to be members of the CNCF security list for Harbor. But everybody else that's a distributor of Harbor will be under an embargo policy and be a part of the CNCF Harbor distributors list that will be made aware of the CV, understand what the embargo policy is, and communicate with them to identify the right date for disclosure. And that's the date at which we're going to basically disclose the CV, create the advisory policies, and let everyone know how to remediate it, whether that's by patching or by doing any workaround. So feel free to read through the security policy. If you guys have any questions or concerns, Slack the maintainer list or send us an email. We'd love to hear from you. And the advisory that we have today is, again, staying in Go Harbor under the Harbor repo. Under advisories, there is one published advisory here, so you can, here, you can click on it, and it talks about the affected versions of the vulnerability. It has a link to the disabling of the self-registration, so you can patch your environment if you cannot upgrade immediately, and then it includes the fixed versions for fixing this issue. And like I mentioned, 176, 183, and 19 do not have this problem. So, you know, I don't want to say that, you know, having a CVE was a good thing, because it really wasn't. That has a significant impact to our customers. But the fact that we had to go through this for the first time, it allowed us to really build a robust process around this that mimics what other CNCF projects have done. And that's a good thing. Now we know how to deal with future CVEs. Any questions on the security process or the CVE that was found in Harbor? All right, cool. Continuing. So I don't
Sorry,
have the.
just
Oh, go ahead.
one question. Was that security issue actually found by a user or just someone on the team?
So very, very interesting. So the actual CV was found. Here's how we kind of viewed Harbor. We started, you know, back in June timeframe. We decided we want to do 2 security penetration testings of Harbor. The first one is paid by CNCF, and that's going to be done in the second week of October by an external vendor called C53. In the meantime, because that was getting too close to the 110 release timeframe for Harbor, which we're planning to release it at or near KubeCon US, we decided to have a second penetration testing that we paid for as VMware. So, you know, VMware being a huge contributor to Harbor, we got an internal team and basically budgeted them to do security and penetration testing of Harbor. They identified the bug. Then when we made a check-in for the bug to basically let everyone know that this is a bug we're fixing and build the releases of Harbor, there was a security researcher that had a crawler that identified that check-in and contacted us and created a blog post about it and a little bit of a media storm around it.
Nice.
But at the end of the day, our team identified the bug, we fixed it, and we reacted very quickly. But obviously, someone external to the Harbor team blogging about it did hurt us a little bit. In the future, we've talked about doing what Kubernetes does, which is obfuscate our check-ins a little bit. That way, they don't indicate that this is a security fix. And after we've made the disclosure and the advisories, go back and edit the details and enter where they are. That's what other open source projects do, and we're probably going to follow the same approach. Because history has shown us that people are crawling our fixes to find CVEs.
Yeah, it gets clicks. Hey, thanks.
So, all right, so 110 for 110, we have a few minor features that we're tracking. So if you're involved in the project, you know, we're trying to basically create immutable repositories. We're trying to create a limited guest account. We're obviously fixing a lot of the security and vulnerability fixes that may be found as part of the penetration testing that will happen the second week of October. But the biggest and most major feature of that is a pluggable scanner that will allow both Aqua and Anchor to bring their own scanners into Harbor and allow a customer who is the project owner to dictate what scanner they want to use. They can use the built-in Claire scanner, or they can use the Aqua or Anchor scanners as a means to validate and run compliance check against their images. There's a demo of that, so if you go to our YouTube playlist, it should be there within the day, that from the morning's meeting that has the demo of the pluggable scanner. The CNCF webinar that we have on October 15th will also include a demo of that. So that's a joint effort between the Harbor team, Aqua, and Anchor. So really, really good stuff there. The next, we have Josh, who's also on the line, that kind of did a demo and basically talked a little bit about Chart Museum to Harbor. I want to mention a couple of things. So one of our goals that we have moving forward is to have better integration with Bitnami and QBabs. And the goal there is it is already possible that you can host some of the Helm charts into Harbor, because Harbor does use Chart Museum, but we want to make that better and more seamless for the end users that are using QBabs. So Josh kind of got a much head start on this. So he has some work here with Helm and I'll basically turn the mic over to Josh so he can tell us about what he did so far. But me as a core maintainer of Harbor, I'm telling you guys that we will have a much better integration moving forward. We want to create a really good better together story, and some of the items and issues that Josh has identified, we want to fix them to facilitate that. So Josh, let me stop sharing and give you the mic.
Thank you very much. See my screen okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Great.
Thank you.
Yep.
So yeah, so like he was saying, I did this presentation earlier today, and I think I tried to stuff too much into it. So I've revised it a little bit. If you want more of the history on this, check the recording for the earlier call. And then there's also a full length of this that's that I gave at Helm Summit. So that should be coming out too. And I'll try to share that with the Harbor Slack room when I get it. But basically, I want to just talk about sort of the push that has been from the Helm side of starting to put things into registries. So just a little bit about me. I am involved with the Helm project via creating the Chart Museum project. So shortly after I released this, it was sort of donated to Helm as an official sub-project. And it's now used as like a backend for a lot of different services. Harbor being one of them, who uses Chart Museum as a backend to serve Helm repository. So the sort of, I think where we're going in the cloud native ecosystem is that sort of sometime next year, I think even now we'll see that the OCI distribution API will become the standard for storing things that are used by cloud native tools. So what kind of things am I talking about? I'm thinking about things like Helm charts, things like OPA bundles. There's CNAB, which is a project that has an artifact type. So things like this will start to be shared using OCI. So I didn't put a lot of detail into OCI. There's kind of a lot to unpack. I'll share my full slides, which has more history, but basically in 2013, Docker came out and they had their own specification for running containers in their own way. The next year, Rocket came out from CoreOS and they sort of had a competing, more open standard to do these things. So then finally, the next year, they agreed on, let's release the Open Container Initiative, which will be the open specification for running containers. And then several years after that, in 2018, they released another specification called Distribution Spec. And the Distribution Spec is essentially the API from the Docker registry project. So Docker distribution or Docker registry, whenever you're doing a Docker push or a Docker pull, it's using this API spec that is now sort of been donated to OCI as their distribution specification. So now when we're talking about registries, we're not calling it Docker registry, we're calling them OCI registries, for example. And here's sort of a visual of like what that is exactly. The red lines represent API calls to these different registries, such as like Amazon ECR, Docker Hub, and things like that. So every time you do a Docker push or a Docker pull, you're using this API that's known as OCI distribution. So there's sort of been a timeline that's happened over the last year that has encouraged people to start using that API to store specifically Helm charts, but there's talks about all sorts of different artifact types, and it's really just become the question of this is more of a generalized API for storage, not just something for container images, even though technically OCI has container in the name, so it's a little bit misleading. And that has actually spawned a new project. I didn't mention this morning. This has spawned a new project called OCI Artifacts, and here's where the discussion, it's at github.com open containers/artifacts. Here's where the discussion has been moved in the community about how to standardize on OCI distribution for non-container image artifacts. That being said, hello?
Yeah, I don't think
Yeah, we can still hear you.
yeah, we can still hear you.
Oh, okay. I heard a mic come unmuted. Sorry. So yeah, so basically that's still kind of under discussion. There has been a library called Aurus, which stands for OCI Registry as Storage, and this is simply just an opinionated way to share arbitrary artifacts over OCI distribution. So this hasn't been fully agreed on by the OCI maintainers group, but I think it's headed in the right direction. And this project is following closely that open containers artifacts repo to be told, the right way to do these things. And the Helm project, so the Helm 3 client has used Aurus as a dependency. So now you can start to do things like logging into different registries using Docker style logins. You can start to download charts from registries in the similar way that you would do a Docker image. You can save charts into a local cache, which I'll share in a demo in a second. And then you can also upload charts using Helm chart push. And keep in mind, like, again, this is all very, very, very early stages. We decided to keep it in the Helm 3 client because of the progress that's already been made, but there's still quite a bit of way to go here. So I highlight this at the top. You do need to flag this explicit experimental OCI on in order to enable this type of stuff in Helm 3. So the question then is, Helm 3 supports this type of functionality, but where are the registries that that support that? And right now, because it's still under discussion with OCI, it's a bit of a tricky question because the public hubs like Docker Hub and Amazon ECR are concerned about things like security and user experience, and they're not necessarily interested in running some experimental project of running Helm charts until OCI kind of gives the thumbs up on the way to go about it. The one exception is Azure Container Registry. They're sort of behind the Aurus effort and all these types of things, so they have this sort of support early on. But if we want to go about deploying this on our own, a registry on our own terms that works with Helm, we really have two options. One being Docker Distribution Project, also known as Docker Registry Project. This is also a backend of the Harbor project, and this is the simplest way to run an OCI compliant registry. And you can do it very easily with the Docker run command, Docker run -p 5000:5000 registry, I think is all you need. That'll run a registry on localhost 5000. And then, which is really the point of this talk, is the other option is Harbor, which is been focusing, you know, all these efforts on creating a robust registry for the cloud native ecosystem. And so I really see that the direction that all of this should go is getting this type of support as a first class citizen in Harbor to kind of push along this initiative of using a standard for saving like different cloud native artifacts in a standard way. And this will then push on to the cloud vendors to say, okay, you know, this is maybe a good idea, Harbor supports it. So right now, there's kind of a lot of moving parts, and I want to get more time to work with the maintainers of the project, of the Harbor project. But I have a fork here. It's under bloodorange.io/Harbor, and this has basically modified a validation method to allow OCI images alongside Docker images. But if you do this, it sort of shows some issues in the UI, and I opened a ticket earlier, and I'll go over what that looks like. But you basically just need to replace the core image, which is this one that's based on top of master at like version 1.9. And then for some reason, with the Helm chart, I needed to disable notary for a certificate. That's probably just an issue with the Helm chart. And then you have to give a TLS certificate in some way. So this is an example of using Cert Manager and Let's Encrypt to host Harbor registry at harbor.mysite.io. And I put this into the CNCF Harbor Slack room, but here is a link for sort of some commands that you can use to install Helm 3, deploy Harbor with this support, and then start to push charts. So like, I'll just really quick walk through some of the things you can do with Helm 3 with Harbor. So I have here several different Helm charts from the stable repository. So what I can do with Helm 3 is, let's take an example here, Ambassador. And I can save like a normal Helm chart. So now what I've done is I've saved this chart to the local cache. We're trying to do some things with Helm where we actually don't allow you to, we're being more strict about the types of tags so we can enforce semantic versioning and things like that. So that would be a rule set on top of OCI. But now what I can do is Helm chart list, and Helm chart list will show me everything that's in my local cache. And then from here, I can actually upload this to Harbor. And that pushes it up to the remote. If you're interested in doing this stuff on your end, I would encourage adding the debug flag. And this actually shows all sorts of interesting stuff, sort of like token authentication, like figuring out if you have the correct scope to do things, and the different OCI API requests that you're making to upload these things. There is some sort of like, it does seem like with the UI for Harbor, there's some issue where after the first chart that I upload, others don't appear. That being said, I am able to, like somebody right now on their end, because it's marked as a public repo, should be able to download this right now using Helm charts pool. Yeah.
Very, very cool. Thank you, Josh. This is great work, by the way. And one of the things I wanted to reiterate here is that we at Harbor were very interested in the OCI and the artifact management that's happening as part of the OCI discussions. Our goal is eventually to be the cloud native store for all the assets, right?
Awesome.
That could include CNAP bundles, which is one of the things that Microsoft cares about, operators, OPA. There's a whole bunch of items that are in the cloud native world that developers may or may not need, and having a repository for all of them that follows RBAC, that follows compliance ruling, and everything else that Harbor brings to the table is going to be very important. So our goal is follow that direction, and we're probably going to have Alex, one of the guys from the team, to work with you moving forward to figure out how Harbor can be a better citizen in this ecosystem. Unfortunately, 1.10 is completely locked and full right now, but as we're starting the planning for 1.11, I think that's the right time for us to have the discussion with you and the team and figure out how to be a better citizen in this.
Yeah, excellent. That sounds great.
Cool. And I don't have anything else on the agenda. We have about a minute. Does anybody have a question or a concern or anything else?
Just to clarify, as a result of the Docker registry supporting OCI artifacts, does Harbor also support OCI already? And it's just we're adding support in the UI, or do we need more work?
So sort of. Basically, there's a service called Harbor Core, and Harbor Core proxies the request. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. Proxies the request down to distribution. So it has extra layers of validation and extracting data, to enable some of the cool things that Harbor does. So distribution itself does, if you run it right now with no extra configuration, support all of this stuff.
Yeah, underneath Harbor is a Docker distribution, right? So if the right version that includes this support is there, it will support it. But obviously, to fully leverage its full functionality, we need to do work in Harbor to enable it, right? So today you can't just go and pump whatever Docker distribution supports into Harbor if Harbor doesn't know about that just yet.
Great.
Yeah, but yeah, it does seem like the UI is kind of the biggest hurdle, like because the backend already supports it.
Cool.
Excellent. Well, everybody have a great day. See you guys in a couple of weeks. And Nathan, you and I will probably be in the maintainers meeting that's happening within the next few days.
Yep, I marked my time slots for that already.
I saw that. Thank you. All right, everybody. Have a good day. Bye.
See you.
All right.